You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.
We're live! Here we are. Congratulations, everybody, for making it. Let me actually mess with the stream settings. Unfortunately, we have no DBRB today, so it's just me holding down the fort. We have a fantastic panel of guests. We have Aerith and CCP Falcon, as well as the infamous Querns has joined us, and Jackal Eve has just resubbed. Thank you. So we have a pretty crazy show today. There's a lot of things to talk about. CCP was acquired by Pearl Abyss, the developers of Black Desert Online. So no doubt there's going to be a lot of questions and interest about that. And similarly, there is a massive war happening in Eve, and we have some updates about what's going on in the north. So while I fiddle with the settings here, why don't we go ahead and have our guests introduce themselves. Ralis Immerus, 29 months, thank you very much. We fear no buyout, and Falcon we trust. So Aerith, why don't you start with yourself? Who are you?
Aerith, CSM, Goonswarm Leadership, Finance, GARPA, just general metagame is my area now in finance.
Sweet. Falcon, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm CCB Falcon, Senior Community Manager for CCB Games, and the guy who's currently the meat shield for all the angry people.
Yikes. Yeah, so are you on the front lines on Reddit?
Very much so.
That is a job that I do not envy. H2046 in 26 months. Thank you very much. Querns, who are you?
Hello, I am Querns. I am a member of Goonswarm Federation, part of the finance team, and all around a good poster. How's it going, everybody?
It goes. Install Linux. Wow, lots of subs here, lots of resubs. Thank you very much. Pew Pew Stuff for 5 months of content, and Herfy for 29 months in a row. My God. As Herfy says, ready for a good old Smugfest after teabagging CO2. There are a lot of Keepstars getting hit, and of course some curious metagame things have taken place regarding the North. What do we want to talk about first? I mean, we have Falcon here as a guest, so I'm kind of thinking that our top story today should be the CCP acquisition. What do you think, guys?
That works
Oh, we
for
did.
me.
Yeah, we got to touch on it for sure.
All right, let me press a button here and play a funky graphic, so the stream team will be happy with me. Hold on. Not actually that happy for me because Corins' nameplate was on top of the top story. Corins, apparently you are our top story. But let's talk about the acquisition. I want to just go ahead and before any non-employees end up spinning this one way or another, I'd like to just give the floor to Falcon, and maybe you can tell us what the official line is, what do you think, and trigger mechanism CO2 is dead 4 months. Thank you very much.
CO2 is dead. Anyway, yeah, on the more serious things. Yeah, I mean, in terms of official line, contrary to popular belief, there is no official line. This is just a thing that happened. It was obviously announced to people inside the company, like maybe a little while before it was announced to the public. It was like Thursday, I think it was announced. Like the last few days have just blurred into just madness because I've been so busy. But yeah, I mean, there's no official company line. There's nothing that I'm being told to say in that respect. It's just something that's occurred. It happens in business, and it's one of those things that everyone just has to deal with.
Have you already been interacting with like a counterpart with Pearl Abyss, or I think I read on VentureBeat that this was not actually official until October 12th. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so it's like there's stuff been signed right now, but obviously, you know, stuff like this takes time. And I believe it's I believe VentureBeat quoted October the 12th as the date that everything would actually be finalized and everything would be done. But to answer your first question, I haven't actually spoken to anyone community related at Pearl Abyss or Cacao yet. I'm hoping that I'm going to because we've you know we've had a little bit of communication with the CEO of Pearl Abyss, Robin, and a few other people because we've obviously been working with like their public relations team, that kind of thing. And they all seem like absolutely lovely people. I mean, I'm very much in the position of anything that hurts my Eve, I will fiercely and savagely rebel against. But yeah, I mean, this feels good from all angles in my opinion, at least.
That makes sense. One of the things that did strike me as interesting is when Black Desert Online first came out, a lot of Eve players went over and interacted with it. It does seem to be one of the few. I mean, it's a medieval sandbox game, but it does seem to be one of the few of that sort. Also, I want to say, Will Mark Tourist just hit the 2-year mark with the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you and congratulations. You now get a fancy subscriber badge for that. I appreciate that. And of course, Big Nick 101. So I'd like to next turn things over to Aerith, who was most recently in Iceland during the. Are you still in Iceland, Aerith?
No, I got back last night. I actually moved my flight forward a day early, so I wouldn't have been able to be here at all. We would have definitely had a blackout of Aerith for the weekend. But no, I got in
God
last night.
forbid.
I know, right? I mean, the smug needs to continue, especially with the North collapsing. So, got back from the summit. I will say it was probably the best summit emotionally for the CSM that we've ever had, at least that I've ever participated in. And that Steve, I think would have agreed, and he's been on a lot more CSMs than I. So, it started off very rocky to the point, I think, that it's very easy as a CSM to become disillusioned to some degree, where you don't know if you're being effective, you don't know if you're being listened to, or you feel that you aren't or not in either case. And I think we left there with a feeling that CCP is very much listening. They're the CCP of old. They're not changing due to this acquisition, and that the new leadership is putting into place, I don't want to say systems or processes, but putting into place a culture that is listening now. Is real. Well, I don't say they weren't, but they're definitely being noticeable now with their listening.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to ask about is, Andy Nordgren, formerly CCP Seagull, left the CCP crew a bit ago, and apparently there's a new executive producer. Did you guys meet with that executive producer, and what were your impressions?
Yeah, we call them the Trinity, actually. All the roles are sort of intermingled now, and Andy, I guess, roles split into, I guess, two, I guess, directly. But realistically, there's a holy trinity now of senior management that we deal with. It seems to flow down to all the various teams.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It basically means like Orca and Berger, Artorfi, I think, are all think of it like each has a different area, whether it's creative or whether it's design or whatever in each area. And between the three of them, it seems like they're making all the major decisions with control within their box individually. So it functions kind of like Star Chamber does, in a sense. Everyone has their specific area, but they function as a whole. It feels very much like how we run our org.
Interesting, sort of a cross-functional team scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be working. The feedback loop seems to be quicker, which is interesting. That's a term I just started using very recently, feedback loop. And it got to the point where when we left, we felt like there was a complete turnaround, because at one point during the summit, I think the CSM was considering very drastic action, because we just felt like the CSM as an institution wasn't effective anymore.
Really?
Yeah, but I think within 24 hours, what we thought completely changed. 48 hours for sure. I think now the CCP is a little more willing to take a risk than they were. I think fatigue, being very, very successful, has, I don't know, given them a little more breathing room where they feel like, okay, they can trust the players. They did that change, and it's
fatigue for fatigue. You mean jump fatigue or something else?
Yeah, jump fatigue. So the change they made, I don't know how long ago now, but where they effectively made it to where it wasn't cancer anymore. We could move fleets. It's still tedious, and you still got to pre-plan, but you can move them for specific fights, which has resulted in a lot of carnage. So that was a very, very positive change. But there was a lot of debate early on within CCP is this going to be good for the game? Like, we put these changes in for a reason. Are these guys just going to use it to, run around and stomp on little fights like they were? And it's like, no, it's very clear we have to move super fleets days or weeks in advance. So they're not very mobile, but they are a force multiplier that, like none other.
Yeah, that does seem to have, I don't think the war in the North would have been possible with the previous jump fatigue levels.
No, not at all. And, meeting with Hilmar, which was a very new thing, especially right on the heels of this acquisition. I mean, we met with him his first meeting of that day, right after the announcement. So last day of the CSM summit, the timing couldn't have been more fortuitous, where we were able to meet with him, to hear from the man himself, what he thought about the future, what the terms were. We can't go into any of them, but I can tell you every question I asked, I felt like I got a forthright answer from Hilmar, and that he was telling me what he believed would be the truth. So, I have no concerns at all about this acquisition. I think it's a very positive thing, because you need to understand that for years, CCP ran as a company gussying themselves up for sale, right? You might not have as much staff as you really need or as you could handle, because you want to make the margins look better or the revenue compared to cost look better. You might sell off IP. You might kill development. Like, you're not going to take any risks. You're going to make everything as good for the books as you can while you're trying to find suitors. And it was no secret that for years CCP was shopping, and because their original investors run out, that's been going on for a long time. And I think Hilmar found the best possible suitor he could have for the future of Eve. I mean, and that's just the reality. That's the business reality of it.
It does seem to make sense in terms of CCP's moves to sell off the World of Darkness IP, for example, to Paradox Studios, as well as just generally making themselves more lean as an organization. And the skill injectors, I'm guessing, between skins and skill injectors, I'm guessing that's a massive injection of revenue. Aerith, one other thing is, I know you spoke for yourself on that, but can you give us an impression, since you guys are fresh back from Iceland, an impression of the general CSM reaction to the acquisition?
I can tell you it was unanimous. We were unanimously positive. We were willing to do, joint statements or a video if CCP wanted to. If CCP didn't really feel that was necessary, and I don't think it is either. There's no reason to cater to the, mouth-breathing hate mob that is never going to listen to you anyway or believe you because somehow they think they know business. But God. I will say there were 3 different executives on the CSM in that room, C-level people in the real world, that do deals like this for a living or involved in them, or consult on them. One of those 3. So we know the questions to ask to get a sense for, is the future about to change? Is there going to be lots of changes in structure or process or leadership or people? And when you get satisfactory answers to those questions, you feel good, right? You're like, okay, I've asked all the due diligence I can without, just trying to probe for the sake of probing. These are very high level, some of them are very tactical as well. And we got all the answers you would hope for in that situation as a player and as a CSM.
That's good to hear. I know that Corns wanted to come on the show not only to smug about the North, but also to comment on the acquisition. So, Corns, the floor is yours. What's your take on all of this?
Well, Eric touched on the main thing that I had, is that for years, CCP's been grooming itself for sale. And the way I see it, there's basically two paths to resolving that. Either you get bought or you die. And thankfully for Eve got bought. So it's seeing that course sort of deviate from what I had seen as guaranteed slow destruction to something where forward progress could be made has made me quite happy.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, if you see a company that is grooming themselves for sale, if they don't actually find a suitor, then that's never good, especially if the original investors do whatever they can to pull out. So that's interesting. What is the reaction from Reddit been? I know, Falcon, you've been out there doing things. Is the player base in general? What's your temperature of the player base as a whole in reaction to this?
I mean, there's a substantial number of our players who, for want of a better phrase, not to demean them, don't really care. They'll just go. They're not bothered who owns CCP. They're not bothered who develops the game. They just want to go on and they want to play Eve. I mean, there's a lot of games out there that I play like that. That I just, I'm not bothered who owns the game. I'm not bothered who runs it. I just want to play it and I want it to be fun. And I think there's always an element of that among our community as well. But when you get to our more invested and our most hardcore veterans, then you're looking at people who don't necessarily play casually. They play a lot more hardcore. They invest a lot of time, a lot of energy. So they're more interested in the company, what's happening with the company, who have been acquired by, what this means for the future. So, I mean, it's from my point of view, there's been a couple of camps kind of thing. There's been the camp that's like quietly a little bit skeptical, but quietly optimistic because they've they've seen what Pearl Abyss do and how they tend to run their games. And then there's the camp of people who have just completely lost their shit. And I think it was always going to be like that. I mean, internally, when we were talking about community reaction to this acquisition, I was like, kind of buckle yourselves in, guys, because we're not in Kansas anymore, kind of thing. This is going to be a rough ride. And it's yeah, I mean, for me at least, although it might seem that we were taken by surprise, for me personally, I think it's gone actually better than I expected. I think, particularly when you were mentioning the REF community, the REF community generally tends to be very skeptical. For the best part, a substantial amount of the REF community generally tend to be anti-CCP as well. And it generally tends to be a case of, we get criticized most heavily there. And with it being, a really, really lightly moderated venue, a lot of the ugly side of things comes out. But, that's fine. We deal with it and that's how it is. I think in terms of how the community's reacted overall, pretty much in line with what I was expecting, a little bit better, in fact. And I think, we can come out and we can repeatedly say nothing's going to change. I mean, that's not true. It's not a case of nothing's going to change. Some things are obviously going to change over time. I mean, we have a different parent and there might end up being different objectives down the road. But in terms of Eve, Pearl Abyss, and right up to Pearl Abyss's CEO, have been very direct and very respectful of both CCP and our community. I mean, there's a lot of CCP fans at Pearl Abyss, ironically, that I've actually only come to realize really recently as I've started to talk to them a little bit more and we've started to hear more about the company. And they've been, right, as I was saying, right up to the CEO, they've been very forthright about the fact that they're not looking to just roll in and change the way that we do things. They're not looking to roll in and change the way that Eve is developed, to start saying, we want you to put these features on the roadmap, or these features, or we want you to do this, or we want you to do that. They've been very, very direct in the fact that they want us to continue business as usual because they admire what we've done with Eve, and they admire how we engage with our community. So yeah, I mean, from my point of view, like what I do in terms of my job, I feel like it's very much business as usual. And I know that a lot of people internally that I've spoke to are just like, this is fucking cool. We're not owned by financial investors anymore. We're owned by a company that actually makes games and understands gamers. And yeah, it's, for me, I think it's a good thing. I'm not worried about it at all.
Have any of you here, just as a sort of a throwaway question, have any of you here actually played Black Desert Online?
I have not.
I actually I dug into it about a year ago, and I tried it out really lightly, and then obviously with the acquisition coming around and whatnot, I started to create a few more characters in the last few weeks, and I feel like it's a little bit like Eve in the sense that like I've played it on and off, but I don't really feel like I've scratched the surface. There's a lot there. So I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna try it out a little bit more. I'm gonna play it alongside Eve and see what it's like, and just try and get a feel for it.
That makes a lot of sense. I do remember when it came out. I haven't played it myself, but I remember that it had complicated trade routes and sort of a very in-depth economy that reminded me of Eve. And if they are having all these castle sieges in Black Desert Online, and now we have space castles in the form of keep stars, here we're having all these castle sieges, it did seem like a kind of interesting synergy there. But let's go ahead and move on actually from the acquisition thing to speaking of castle sieges and keep stars. A lot of things have been happening in the northwestern section of the galaxy over the past week. Just a really I don't want to force CCP Falcon to comment about any of the things that have happened with a certain player who's the leader of a certain alliance or was before he got banned, and the just the power vacuum that has opened in the Northwest as a result. So instead, what I'll do is hand things over to Querns. Querns, can you give us your take on what's been happening in the Northwest recently?
All right, so what we're seeing is pretty much total collapse from my admittedly limited viewpoint. After the event you alluded to that we're not going to get into, CO2 just kind of stopped happening. Like their numbers have gone to crap. The op tempo we've had has increased dramatically, and we've had no defeats that I'm aware of. I'll have to go look at that tracking thread.
In like a month.
Yeah, I mean, thank you to the guy who does that tracking thread. It's super awesome. I love reading it. So anyways, but yeah, I'm not really sure what they do to claw back from this one.
So one of the things that was interesting about the CSM Summit is that there's a lot of people from the Galactic North at the CSM Summit, along with a lot of Imperium members. Aerith, can you give us, I mean, a lot of things there were OPSEC, but can you give us your impression from talking to the people in the Northern leadership that you encountered at the CSM Summit? What do you think? What's going on through their heads? What's going on?
Well, I mean, we spent a lot of time with Swart and Killa because the nights you go drinking, you go to dinner, whatever. So you get to know somebody over a week. And furthermore, a lot of that stuff went down at the summit where we were figuring out real time what had happened. Like I remember, I think it was Sunday. I had just got to Iceland the day before, which effectively, gave me 1 day of rest, or maybe it was Saturday night, I forget. I think it was Sunday, where I was checking our comms channels, like internally in our leadership channels. And Jay had put in there, hey, the Gigs is using another character. Like he's got another, like the Gig X. And we're like, well, why would he do that? And, he was going to FC from it or whatever. And so I said, well, hey, I'm going to be here fishing on a boat with Killer, I think it was. And I said, maybe we should just ask the guys, like, do you guys know something? And they didn't. His allies didn't know anything, but they asked. And, he confirmed, like, yeah, like I'm banned again. And it's like, okay, like that's big news not to tell your people or your allies and just sit on. And I think at that point he had been banned for 3 days, he said. And so, wow. And that was something, we immediately had to, take advantage of, in the form of propaganda. And Querns did God's work by starting the Reddit thread for me, and he ran with it. He's our best Reddit poster ever. I had to coordinate with INN to get the article up, to get him some basic details. So, we broke it to CO2's line members that their leader was banned again, and he wasn't telling them for days. Like, dude, that's not smart. And so ever since then, I think their morale's been in the crapper.
Is it fair? I'm sorry, you go.
I was going to say, and you got to remember, this is all on top of them feeding hard for over a month now, where we're not losing any fights. All we're doing is they're feeding us, and it's just, rape. There's been no whelp days for, I think, 6 weeks, to the point where we're joking about it internally. Like, when is the hammer going to fall? Like, this is the most ridiculous string of wins in our history, where just unbroken, and they're all completely lopsided. and then you add this on top of it, it's like it's over. And they lost their iHub. It's like they're collapsing.
It is really curious to see how many of these keep stars are now at risk. The CO2 staging keep star in DW has been, I think, put into its hull timer now. There was no resistance that I'm aware of for either the shield or the armor timer. Was that the one that we were hitting earlier today? We delayed the fireside chat today on account of the purge ops that the Imperium is running. But it does seem like
we ref the keep, and then we have another op for another iHub or something. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so DW is in the hull.
Yeah, real quick. Someone in the chat was asking about a link to the continual war update thread. I can't post the link, but if you go to goonfleet.com and look in the war room, it should be sticky near the top.
Sweet. And there is a DO6 iHub timer that's coming out in Australian time zone at around 8:30 Eve. The Imperium is forming up. So for those of you, since we haven't had a fireside chat today, if you're in the Imperium, please be around for that if you can. I know it's an odd hour because our enemies are primarily time zone tanking this. But DO6 is the Guardians of the Galaxy Northern Staging Keep Star. If they lose their iHub and their Sino Jammer protection there, it is open season. I want to actually move the commentary here back to CCP Falcon. How has it been from a community relations perspective? Have you been paying attention to what's been happening in the war? Have you guys mainly been busy with the Pearl Abyss stuff? What's your take on things?
I mean, yeah, I've been pretty busy with the Pearl Abyss stuff since, well, for 2-3 months now. But in respect for the war, yeah, I mean, obviously, shit's going down. We've had a little bit of server instability here and there that obviously has been that's been brought up numerous and multiple times. But away from that, I mean, in terms of from our point of view, all we're trying to do is make sure that you guys have sort of the cleanest, straightest, solidest environment to play in. So, I mean, the only thing we can really do is kind of like, make sure you guys, we tell you guys as much as possible to get your fleet fight requests in, and then sort of like batten down the hatches and see how crazy things get. I'm actually, it's weird, but before I came to CCP, I was a low-sec pirate. I didn't really engage in null-sec warfare, but I actually had I had friends in PL, I had friends in Goons as well, and a few other places. So I would keep like one eye kind of a little bit lazily on the meta, and I would watch what was going on politically, but I've never really been hugely into nullsec politics. Since I got to CCP, I've actually sort of watched it a little bit more, but kind of in a weird way from the fence, rather than being like heavily involved or looking at it in great detail. And mainly what I try and do from my point of view is I try and just sort of keep tabs on what's going on. And just make sure that if I see anything big coming up, that our ops team, our engineering teams are all aware of it, so we can just give you guys the best possible environment to play in. So, yeah, from our point of view, we try and keep out of the sandbox and just wait to see what happens, and just try to make sure you guys have the engineering support that you need from every respect.
Well, let me spoil it for you. A bunch of keeps are gonna die.
Oh yeah, I'm fucking aware of that, bud.
Okay, for our viewership, a lot of keeps gonna die. Get your shit up there.
Has can you say if there have been specific interventions from an engineering perspective, like since this war began? I know that you guys are doing stuff, but can you maybe describe some of the things that have been done to help improve stability?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the first things we did, I think it was the Jesus, I can't remember which fight it was, but there was a fight a little while back where we turned off part of the bounty system for a test, just to make sure. I'm not sure whether it was ULX or the other one, but anyway.
Yeah, it was the one in the north.
Yeah, it was the one in the north. Yeah, so we turned off part of the bounty system just to see what the performance improvement would be like. And we got a lot of good data from that. That was fantastic. And I know there's been a lot of talks about server stability last week as well while the CSM was here. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We're also looking at there's some more hardware coming in soon, as far as I'm aware. That I was talking to Hilmar about a couple of weeks back. We've ordered some new stuff from IBM. But again, I mean, that's not throwing hardware at the problem is never going to be a solution, because hardware can only take so much, and then you get into the realms of having to deal with code and you have to deal with software. But Yeah, I mean we're always looking at ways to improve things, and I think some of the testing that we've been doing recently, in terms of turning little bits of the bounty system off and looking at ways that we can sort of move more services out of what's known internally as the monolith, the kind of the base of Eve's code that does all of the really hard legwork. Moving more of our services out there and turning them into microservices in the cloud, I think is probably the way forward, and that's what quite a few of our engineering guys are working on right now. We semi-successfully pulled the chat system out, for instance, and that's now running as its own cloud service that connects to TQ. That's now looking a lot more stable than it was a little while back. It's took us a while to get it into that shape, but every day is a school day. We're learning, and then from there, we're looking at other services we can potentially take sort of off TQ, just to give the node that a fleet fight will run on a lot more just base horsepower to be able to deal with all the physics calculations, the positioning calculations, the damage calculations, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're always working pretty hard in that respect.
As a developer, I gotta say, I'm liking what I'm hearing, especially the part where you guys realize that throwing more hardware isn't going to solve the problem, because at its core, a lot of Eve is still single-threaded code, and processors stopped increasing in clock cycles, obeying Moore's law a long time ago. So the amount of gains that you can get from that is sharply limited these days. So seeing that you're moving things out of that monolith, which is, I'm assuming, is mostly the single-threaded code that you guys are running, and into other avenues, is good to hear. It means that engineering has their shit together.
Yeah, I mean we've got a lot of super smart people at CCP, although quite a few of our community don't appreciate that or understand that. But we do have a lot of super smart people at CCP, and they are working. They're working around the clock pretty hard to make sure that Eve is given the best performance possible. It's just a matter of, it's change can only come incrementally, one stage at a time. And there's only so many people and so much resources we can throw at making this happen. So it just takes a little bit of a while, but we're getting there.
That makes sense. So one of the things, I just want to stay on this hardware thing for a minute with one further follow-up question. This time for Aerith, when the CSM was in Iceland, did you guys, I know you can't tell us any details, did you guys have any discussions regarding hardware or engineering work to make these big battles smoother?
Several. I would say it probably was 2.5 sessions worth at least. It was a significant amount of our time.
Wow. Okay, so that's interesting. I think that's really good news. My personal take. Hearing Falcon's detailed answer, Corin's validation of it, and the fact that the CSM spent a substantial amount of time on it as well. That's fantastic. Hopefully, we won't have to see any more, horde fleets with everybody having a 1 ISK bounty on them as lag generating machines. Though
I would say this is a really complex system, and it's probably not going to be one thing or two things or three. It's going to be half a dozen things they're going to have to do to make it better.
Gotcha. Well, Aerith, let's go back to the war. One of the things that I've noticed from what's been happening up north is that the enemy has been relying primarily on Munin fleets. Do you or Corins or Falcon have any opinion on this? Because mostly it seems like they've been just getting vaporized by bombs, and I'm not exactly the best fleet commander, so I was curious about your take.
Yeah, I mean, they would be fine if all they were fighting was the Munins, or I guess a good BS doctrine, which they would normally dumpster, but they're fighting us, who have more numbers than them, who have good bomber FCs, and a lot of their FCs at this point are not their A game FCs. They're like their D tier, like just dumpster guys that are coming out just getting hazed. So I think everyone's burnt out, their morale's low, their frontline FCs are not fighting anymore. And I think you can see that based on who FCs these fleets. And then there's gigs who will just feed you no matter what because he's pure aggression. And when you know that, you can just haze him. So they're just losing massive ISK war battles over and over and over. Their guys aren't showing anymore. And what are you going to do? Like, our numbers are getting better because we're hazing people over and over, and people love to pad the kill board, and they're getting worse. And so that's the result of all of it.
Two things on this. One, from what I understand, and I am not a fleet commander, so please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat or anybody, but Munins do work well against battleship fleets, except for the fact that Megathrons have a tracking bonus. If we were fielding Maelstroms and Rokes, then yeah, they would dumpster us completely, barring any major pilot error or FC error. But the fact that we're running Megathrons means that we can track the Munins, even though that they're heavy assault cruisers and having the MWD bloom bonus and whatnot. So it's kind of a strange choice in that respect because of just incidentally how we have our stuff run. We didn't choose Megathrons because, you know, we expected to field Munins. You know, we've had the Megathron fleet for, God, since 2016, I think was when it came back, right?
Well, there's the other thing. Killer was saying at the summit, he was reading the story, how he was so frustrated with those Northern FCs because they would run Munins and he would tell them how to run them or whatever, and they wouldn't listen to him. They'd warp in at 20, load EMP, and just get wrecked. And he's like, that's not how you run Munins. And I guess he can't teach them. They're just too dense.
Yeah. And so the other thing is they're T2 ships. And guess who owns the T2 market? Who could it be? Oh, wait, I'll tell you. It's us. We own the T2 market. So every time we dumpster a Munin fleet, it's in our pockets. We're probably selling them most, maybe all of the Munins that they purchase.
I was surprised to see that the hull price or the lost price of the Munins that they've been losing is something. It's almost $500 million ISK. I thought I saw them like running about 440 with their FID. Or did I look at the incorrect Munin? What is the what are they going for these days?
I'd have to look. Let's see.
All right. Well, while you do that, Aerith, what do you think is the end game for the northern situation? I mean, and I want to set that up a little bit. Preface that with, in most of the wars that we've seen throughout the history of EVE, war is about conquering territory, right? You go to a territory and you roll a region and then you live in the region or you put somebody there. This war seems like it's a little bit different because the Imperium and Legacy Coalition don't really have anybody waiting in the wings to take over the North, so it's been this strange harassment campaign. So given that, you know, where by a harassment campaign, I mean we're blowing up their Titans and their super fleets, and we're blowing up their Keep Stars, so it's large-scale harassment. But what do you think is the end game for the North in this unusual scenario?
Their only end game is when we decide the end game is, basically. Like, at this point, we're going to roll them. It's just a hazing from here on out. And we're the Mongolian hordes, and we have to decide how much do we want to burn. Do we want to burn one region? 5 regions? Do we want to burn the entire North over the next year? I had heard a SoundCloud where they like goons don't have stamina or whatever. It's like, you realize we've been at this for a year and a half. Like, people think this started 3 months ago. This didn't start 3 months ago. We've had forces here over a year preparing this area for this. So, you know, we have shown more stamina than any organization in the history of EVE. You know, the Great War proved that. We haven't lost that. And now the hostiles are completely cascading because our cadence has never stopped. We've just gotten faster cadence. And they can't deal with it anymore. As soon as they lose the iHub or a jammer fight, they just peace out because they're going to get hazed. They know it. They can't push all in again because they'll get hazed. And so now they just have to hope that, you know, we stop at some point. And you'll hear conjecture, will they stop at Fade? No. Will they stop at Deck? I don't know. Probably not. Will they stop at Tribute? Let's see.
That's it's going to be a curious one. Quarrens, again, same question. What do you think is the end game here in this scenario?
I largely agree. It's going to basically be when we peter out. So they're not wrong that it's going to be the end game is going to be when we get tired, when we, you know, decide to take our ball and go home. But when is that? Who's to say? Certainly not them. Certainly, you know, we're not going to say.
Like, we're definitely not going to leave. And I was telling Kill and Sword this summer, we're not going to leave when you're feeding us 100 billion-ist fleets a day, sometimes multiple times a day. And even a slow day, you feed us like we lose 10 billion, you lose 50. That's never going to happen. We'll just keep bleeding you till you're dead. So now they have to decide, okay, if we all go home and turtle up in our own region, it's the old story. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. It's like, I just have to turtle up harder than the next guy and hope that the goons get bored before they get to my turtle. Like, that's where we're at.
One of the things that's curious about this is just the, you know, on the one hand, the high-profile fights involve fights over Keep Stars. But leading into this war, there was a tremendous amount of harassment, and there still is a tremendous amount of harassment. The NGSA program has cloaky campers blanketing the entirety of the North, or not the entirety, I should say large sections of the North. And Reavers and Space Violence and many other SIGs and squads have been up there, just making it impossible to rat or mine for the line members. Do you think that the North expects us, like, you know, do you think that they expect that we will go home and stop harassing them entirely? I mean, if we move our super fleet home, what's to stop us from just continuing to twist the knife?
I think they believe it because they want to believe it. They need to believe it because the only alternative is just them getting hazed, and, you know, and we throw them down off the bed when we've used them all up type scenario, like you have to hope that we just get tired of raping you when we leave the hotel room, right? Yeah. I think their problem is going to be, it's going to be hard to tell our guys, oh, are you really tired of killing keep stars? That's a tough one, because most people are going to be like, yeah, I like killing keep stars, boss.
It does seem to be pretty fun. They are definitely big fat kill whales. Speaking of keep stars, there was an incident earlier this week, I believe. Yes, it was earlier this week, where the Mila keep star was mysteriously stolen in the midst of a move. So, of the two major public-oriented trade hubs for Titans and Supers, that being Aunanen and Mila. Aunanen was successfully moved, and Mila was stolen, yoinked, by, I forgot who it was that did it. But
on a trade federation, I believe, or however it is.
yeah, Corns, can you, since you're an economic expert, do you want to speak a little bit about the impact on the sort of pubby trade and markets? How well used were these former NETC keep stars in Aunanen and Mila?
I don't have any official figures on it, but basically just based on spot checking every once in a while, it seemed like the Mila and Aunanen ones, however the hell you pronounce that, were fairly well trafficked as far as neutral sale points. So the fact that they're no longer around is going to be a bit of a blow to people who are wanting to unload their super capitals. Now, that being said, it's significant because those keep stars were erected specifically to concentrate super capitals in the hands of our enemies. That's no secret that was the case. And now that they're gone, that vector for them buttressing their super capital forces by basically just concentrating unaligned super caps into the hands of one or two groups is gone. So it's going to be we were talking a while. I think you said it, Batani, multiple times on firesides and whatnot. But the purpose of this war is to widen the gap, to increase our advantage over our enemies, and having those keep stars be gone via gunboat diplomacy, if not outright destruction, widens that gap. It's not by much, but it does help. So it's definitely a win for us.
Yeah, you got to understand, like, our meta now is preparing for what's next. So, we've won. I mean, anyone that debates that at this point is a fool. There's not going to be any grand rally from the north to push us back. At this point, it's how much are we willing to kill, how long are we willing to take. It's not even really going to be an is thing anymore. It's just going to be how long can our attention be held by this thing. And right now, there's probably no end in sight. Could we have stood down if we wanted to? Sure. Are we going to now? No. I think that there may have been a window where the North could have, tried to present something to us and bend the knee or something like that. But I think now that they're this far on the ropes and that it's this public that they're cascading, it's just going to be pound town right now for a few hours, that kind of thing. And then it'll continue for months, probably. There's no reason for us to not continue when we can keep half our supers at home and you can't touch us, and we can keep the other half here and just own zone everybody.
One of the things that I want to point out here is up until the CO2 failure cascade, we were. This is sort of the leak zone. I was going to call the war. We were going to blow up the CO2 keep star. We were going to do Mala, Aunanen, and maybe one other, and then the big final battle was going to be the CO2 keep star. And then we would move our Titans and Supers back home, and then we would keep the SIGs and squads and the harassment forces up north. Like there's. I just want to go ahead and say this to our enemies. There's no end for that. Like we are just going to keep trying to make sure that the North cannot economically outcompete us in the production of Titans and Supers. So there's never gonna be an end to the Reavers. There's never gonna be an end to the NGSA. It might relocate slightly around the North, but it's always going to be there. But after CO2 sort of spectacularly imploded, and we're just seeing this sort of fragmentation between the leadership of the hostiles. I mean, I think a bunch of them are playing WoW. Grath Telkin said that he was quitting EVE because of the Pearl Abyss acquisition. It's really just been a perfect storm. It would be almost impossible to hold our guys back. One of the things that I want to go and do and point out here, in 2 minutes, we're going to have the Cool Kids Club, guys. So that's when we go into subscribers only mode and we take questions and answers. And you guys can pepper Falcon with questions if you so choose. Is there anything before we get to that point, though, that else you'd like to point out about the northern situation there, Aerith? Do you know actually? Slight topic change. Do you know, has there been anyone seeing any sort of activity in the east? Last week we were talking about it, and it seemed like activity against the Legacy Coalition, the other half of this war, had collapsed. Were there any updates there that we were aware of?
I mean, I guess they killed that keep of that was Memorial Day drop or whatever, just a retarded thing to do.
Another dead Keepstar.
Yeah, another dead Keepstar. But other than that, I think the East is just, will Test continue to advance, or will they just consolidate their gains, or what is Test going to do? But I think Test can punish the East, if you will, at will. It's just a question of how much Test wants to punish them.
There's a question here, and I'm going to go ahead and put the server into Cool Kids mode. But before we get there, the question is, so are we going to have a Serenity server under Goons? What do you think about that, Corns?
Maybe. But seriously, I've got some ideas on that front. I don't want to talk about them too much because they're kind of half-baked, if I'm being perfectly honest. But we might have a way to stave that off. But as far as military conquest goes, yeah, things aren't looking good on that front.
One of the things I'll say to that is that while we do see the Imperium gaining in terms of power, we haven't really just completely outstripped the enemy. Like in terms of hardware, they still have a lot of hardware. It's just that their leadership is playing Battle for Azeroth in World of Warcraft land. Those Titan fleets are still there, and they present a threat. Falcon, what do you think? Somebody was asking this as well earlier. What do you think of the risks of Tranquility turning into Serenity?
I mean, the risk is always there. When you get one force that's clearly very dominant, then you end up with sort of not so much a blue donut situation, but I own the entire of nullsec kind of situation, which I don't know, yeah, isn't really healthy. But if that's what happens, that's what happens. I mean, it's not like we would then turn around and dip our toes into the sandbox and start, yoinking Sov or whatever, or being dicks about it. I mean, if someone wins a fight, they get to enjoy the spoils of battle. That's what it is. I'm honestly just waiting for the day when we hear that wonderful noise of a new challenger has appeared, and then maybe something will actually happen that's exciting and fun. But yeah, it's one of those things. We keep a close eye on it. We obviously keep a close eye on the economy. We look at who's producing the most supers. We look at who's producing the most T2, and obviously where all the ISK's coming from. And yeah, I mean, it's just if it's happening fairly and it's happening within the game rules, then there's nothing we want to or can do about it.
Well, it's happening within the game rules, that's for sure. It's just so lopsided. However, a lot of our economic power is based on this plan that we've been executing, and we've actually hit. It's kind of a 9-step plan I have, and we're in phase 5, and I'm actually stuck. It's going to take more effort to get to 6 than I thought. On my personal part, and in the economic team, we probably not going to have enough people, in the short term to really get it going. But so that's interesting. The mechanics will actually allow us to go further, but we're running into effort limits right now among some of us that are in the finance team. But even with that being said, with only at phase 5, we're still so dominant over all other people. And when another one pops up, we just go and hack it down. So Deck was originally a very prosperous region. It was growing quickly, and we went in there and just took our weed whacker to it and cut it all down. And now it's dead. And now if we keep advancing, it'll be dead. So that's where EVE is at right now. It's an economic warfare time. The age of diplomacy, the age of the military. Now we're the age of the economy, and goons do that better than anybody.
It is really sort of a curious thing, and I'm going to get to another question here in a moment. But we've talked about this on the Meta Show before. The reason why the Imperium has achieved this sort of economic superiority is not only because we have smart economy people, and I don't want to be insulting to Aerith, but one of the things that has surprised me was when this massive moon race kicked off, when the refining platforms were put in. We just really didn't, we pushed everything that we had into getting as many moons platformed as we could, and we simply did not see alliance level efforts from our enemies to do this. We saw them much later. At which point did you guys see the Imperium's competitors actually starting to take up the moon race?
I would say they started about 6 months ago, but the problem is they had never done anything else. They had never set up the mineral race. They'd never done anything else. So they failed horribly. It's not great. Renters don't want to mine moons. They don't want to mine in general. They want a rat. They want to get their ISK, and they transfer it around easily. They don't want to mess with minerals for the most part and schlep them around. And minerals only really work if you're a little more dense than ratters. Like ratters are so spread out, and the concentration of individual systems is so low. You effectively are nerfing yourself with that model, but the model's still very good. So the landlords, they get ISK. And so those are the two economic models right now. It's the concentrated economy model or economy model, and then there's the renter model. I would like to see a third economic model, which is the ravening horde model, where you can go in and someone had the old money trees idea. I don't remember who had the money trees idea, but back in the day, that there would be trees that grow that you can't really defend easily unless you show up on field and everyone raids that money tree at a time, something like that. You don't have that economic model today. That's kind of sad because I think there's a lot of players that like that play style. But in the current meta, if you're not set up correctly, you're doomed, and the North is not set up correctly at all.
That's
one thing.
Corns, you go.
Yeah, so one thing about mining that we can hit on here is that mining is a thing that you do to increase the density of the space that you already own. And the thing with renting is a thing that you do in response to owning too much space, that space that you cannot utilize, that you need to put bodies in, that you want to make money from, just at a minimum of manpower. And so the two prospects are sort of at odds, especially considering considering the fact that you have to protect miners, and protecting miners also does well with density. I mean, look at Delve. We protect our miners arguably greater than anyone, and that's because we've got them all in one tiny little area. So the model of renting and the model of mining, the things you need that those two things excel at, are basically diametrically opposed. So that's why you don't really see the renter regions doing a lot of mining.
That makes sense. I have a question here for Falcon from Ashram the Dragon Rider, which is, are we going to have to pay a high subscription or even pay for expansions in the future? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
This is one of those things that everyone has been speculating about. What's going to happen to free expansions? What's going to happen to monetization? Blah blah blah. These questions have been, really prevalent over the course of the last couple of days. And the super simple response to this is we are planning zero changes, no changes at all to how EVE is currently delivered or what you pay for.
Excellent, thank you. Here's another one. Hypothetically, would we being the Imperium, accept a surrender from the North, and also how humiliating would it need to be?
I would say that we would have, and it would have been very humiliating, like a whole group of guys running a train on you and spit roasting you in a public square while being streamed in HD to the entire country. But even that's probably off the table now.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself on this, it's not really a scenario where, like, one of the challenges that we have from a diplomatic perspective is that the primary enemy force here is NC Dot, right? And NC Dot is run by Vince Draken. The Imperium has done deals in the past during the Fountain War, which was in 2013, with Vince Draken, and he broke that deal. We have a pretty long memory when it comes to this, and essentially you just can't make a deal with Vince because he'll just betray it. So in a different scenario, I could see a settlement, but it's going to be hard to make any kind of peace treaty of any kind if it's going to have Vince's John Hancock on it.
Well, he would need to put some earnest money down. Like, we would be, hey, give us trillions of ISK just so we know that you might be serious because you're a duplicitous piece of shit. That's one way to do it. Or the other way is just like, hey, you release a public statement saying you're a beta cuck to goons for all eternity, and now we're talking.
I don't think we're going to get a public statement of humiliation, but yeah, the earnest money idea is a decent one. I don't see that the enemy would do that, though, because one of the challenges that they have is I think they're kind of broke after having all those Titans to reimburse. So, if they do actually have ISK, I guess the only people who would have it at this point would be NC Dot. We saw a report the other day that Darkness was having trouble actually reimbursing just lost Rorquals from that gank that happened the other week in Geminate.
Well, I mean, think about it. If going into the summit, you have a question for how much risk they have left and you want to feel them out, one way to do it would be to, try to put a deal on the table and ask them for it. That'd be one way to try to feel them out, see whether they're interested in it, but maybe not the price tag. And then oh, these bitches are broke. And if they're broke, then you just start pushing deeper and deeper. You know what I'm saying?
That would be a pretty interesting thing to do.
Okay. We have some comments here about more trophies for the trophy cabinet. Yes, that is a thing that the Imperium has started doing. Maybe we could actually get them to give us some faction fortizars or something like that, because we are attempting to create an entire line of stolen faction fortizars in 1DQ1. Here's another question here from Green Lantern 101 for CCP Falcon, which is, are we going to see any more NPC Sotio type content?
Good question. I know that the guys are really happy with how the stuff went out so far. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't rule it out in the future. We're always looking to introduce new PvE stuff. So yeah, I mean, could be. Don't know at this stage.
That's a reasonable question. All right, interesting. Let's see what else we have here. A lot of comments on the CO2 thing in general. It is a interesting example of a GigX did seem to be like pretty much the only fleet commander who was regularly doing anything in CO2. So, what do you think about the fact that he kept things secret for so long before finding out about before his members found out about the ban? Quarrens, you were front line on that Reddit posting. What was your analysis?
Maybe they were just praying that it wouldn't come to light. It's like, it's a really shitty thing to do to your members to keep them in the dark like that. You've built an alliance that is essentially a cult of personality around one man. Not that we would know anything about that,
right?
But when you do that, it kind of puts everything on a single point of failure, and then whenever that point of failure predictably fails because it's sort of reactionary and emotional like that, as it do, then you kind of have to come forward with it before some asshole does, for you, without your permission. And they failed to do that, and now they're suffering the consequences in reduced fleet numbers and all sorts of other stuff. I don't know if I should go into or not.
I think it's reasonable for you to talk about what's happening with CO2 as long as it's things that people in the Imperium are aware of.
Oh, what am I going to say here? Well, it's just I'll just say that their op tempo hasn't been great. There's a reason for that.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Aerith, what do you think is the fate of CO2?
CO2 will probably run off like Horde did, like cowered out, try to go deep in the drone regions is my guess. I don't believe there's a scenario where Giggs doesn't keep trying to, ban evade or whatever. So he'll be around in some form, like whack-a-mole, most likely, if CCP is going to keep, banning him or whatever. But I think they continue to remain in some form. I would think. I mean, their corps are going to be being poached, and in general, the northern corps are being poached. But I think they can run and hide somewhere, is my guess.
The last time this happened, when GigX was first banned on Judgment Day, the entire alliance just disintegrated. Of course, it helped that the judge kind of, pulled the trigger on all of that. But I am kind of curious to see, has GigX been continuing to try to ban evade? Like, has he continued to try to manufacture alts?
Well, yeah, that's how we found out about this term or this time around or whatever was he had been playing on a character called The Giggs, and then there was another character made called The Giggs, and I guess we had intelligence from a spy that he was using that character, like, or pinging it for fleet or something like that, and we were like, well, why would he make another one unless he's either preparing to be banned or he is banned? And so once we could confirm he was banned, then it was like, okay.
Falcon, what does CCP do? I don't want you to actually speak to the GigX thing specifically, but does CCP have any methods for dealing with players who are doing ban evasion, or is it sort of like a petition and pray scenario? How does this typically go down?
We obviously will have methods for identifying people, but typically it's a case of when it's reported to us, we'll act on it.
That sounds reasonable. So if you guys find a GigX alt, you know what to do. Would that just be through a normal petition reporting?
Yeah, support tickets are fine. That's generally what we take in.
Gotcha. All right, well, we are coming close to the end of the show. There's one question here, which is, does CO2 have any couches left to crash on? And that is a good question.
Well, we should give a warning to all of Eve. If you let CO2 crash on your couch, there's a good chance we'd come and rape you. Like Horde, if Horde were to let them crash and Geminate, we might have to burn Geminate to the ground.
Yeah, I don't really think we're going to see Horde take in CO2. But let's go ahead. Any final words there, Aerith? Hopefully not involving rape jokes.
Well, I mean, you are looking cute, but no, I would say everyone needs to just understand that this has been playing out over many, many months, over a year. This is essentially take two of the casino war, except we're the casino now. And, we learned our lessons from that war is, it's mass people, mass titans, mass money. Well, now we're the 800-pound gorilla. There's no one left on the field, so we're the Lords of Eve.
That is as humble as ever. Any final words there, Quarrens?
Yeah, one thing I gotta say. Why is the North using the old Northern Coalition no-dot model for owning SOV? All of these fractured SOV holders, that can't help each other out for their iHub timers and whatnot. We consolidated for a reason. You did not. Why?
That is a very good question. For people who are unaware of what that SOV model is, the Imperium has all SOV under Goonswarm Federation, even though the Imperium has many different coalitions, because we learned in the Casino War, many different alliance, one coalition. We learned during the Casino War that, a defender can only counter hack for their own SOV. So anyone can attack because Fozzie SOV is genius, but only one defending alliance. And as Quarrens points out, the North is a patchwork of little alliances, and it seems like poor planning. So on the final word for the show, before we close out for the day, I would like to hand things over to CCP Falcon to say whatever the hell you feel like, and tell folks goodbye.
You do not want me to say whatever the hell I feel like, but yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting few days. We host an AMA on the forums. I think the main thing now for people to take away from this and to take away from the AMA and the announcements is that business as usual, guys. Your Eve is not dying. Well, it's been dying for 16 years apparently, because it was dying in 2002 when it was in beta. But don't panic. Don't batten down the hatches. Don't worry about it. Looks like there's some more good fights coming up. So just take it easy, have a breather, and just, let the good times roll. It's going to be all good.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. And we will catch up next week. I want to thank Aerith, CCP Falcon, and Quarrens for being our guests. We will have DBRB back next week, I hope. And we will catch you all on the flip side.
Lasagna, don't get any on you.
You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching